Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Collinwood, and I'm here to do a weekly read-along review of a new story written by John Philip Betancourt called "To Be Night and Beguile." So this is Chapter 1, A New World. A lovely woman brushed the dark hair of her equally as beautiful 11-year-old daughter. Their deep brown eyes locked in each other's gaze in the reflection of the mirror. As the mother carefully combed with a silver horsehair brush, the candle light glistened in the initials Egypt sorry, that were engraved in it. The mother suddenly stopped brushing and placed her soft hands on the daughter's shoulders and took a breath of pride at her beautiful girl's reflection. You'll enter a world of endless fortune and new beginnings. You're our hope, darling. To keep things on our end afloat, it's up to you. It's all up to you. No pressure. The mother said, signaling to the young woman that indeed this day was be the biggest day, going to be the biggest day of her life. Today, the young lady was about to meet the boy she would marry when she turned 24 years old, a young, rich American boy from an island off the coast of Maine. What if he doesn't like me? The young lady said, turning to her mother to face her away from the mirror. He will. He will love you, my darling. He will love you for all eternity. I promise you. The young lady smiled, trusting her mother with everything she had in her little soul. Her mother's voice echoed over and over, like the sea crashing on the waves, on the white, sanded English shore in Liverpool. 13 years later, in 1911, as she sat and watched from behind the steamy glass of her father's Knox 15 automobile, she remembered this moment with her mother in the mirror as her belongings packed away in 4 large trunks that were loaded onto a large steamship headed for the New World. Her New World. America. The years since she first met the young American boy, like 100 rather than only 13, now she was about to embark on a journey over the wild waves of the Atlantic, headed to her new destiny. Everything seemed to be uncertain. Everything seemed to be going so fast. As she stepped out onto the weathered ancient dock, her dark blue velvet dress dragged behind her, she looked out onto the sea. Ow. Sorry. Just beyond the docked steamship, and wondered, had her family made the right decision for her? It frustrated her that she was unable to live out her own destiny, and that so much of her family's survival was set up on whether or not she would do well. So yeah, in of all things, an arranged marriage. It was a feeling she battled over and over in her head. She wanted to define herself for herself, but at a young age. When she had no choice, her future was written for her. A new home, country, and new family that she would marry into awaited her arrival in America. This was her now reality, as unwanted as it was. As she climbed up the long ramp from the dock to the ship's open hill door, the young English woman pulled out her ticket, revealing her name as Lady Evangeline Jordan, the young heiress whose family had gone from the heights of British society to almost ruin. They had fallen on hard times, struggling through financial issues despite once living in the lap of luxury. But by 1906, things changed. The family textile businesses failed and the Jordan family's survival was hinged on sending their son Nicholas to work in the London factories and on the betrothal of Evangeline, or Evie, as her closest friends and family called her, to the young Sebastian Lord of Welshport Island in Maine, United States. Now aboard, Evie gazed down through tear-filled eyes at her family waving goodbye. She could still remember her father's tight face, frozen, an emotion trying not to crack as he waved. Her mother, unbearably sad, waving away her only daughter, as her pink dress seemed to sway with the waves, and her brother Nicky, tall and bright, holding both parents, the shoulders from behind squeezing them close. Evie turned away, unable to bear another look, just as the seagulls began to sing her a song from their aerial stage as the anchor slowly lifted from its watery perch. Evie began to walk up the ship's staircase, so freshly painted in white, when she turned to an Irish voice coming from behind her. It was a bellhop still holding Evie's ticket. He handed her a slip of paper. It was Evie's cabin assignment. You'll be sharing a large suite on deck one with a Miss Randall Ruth, the bellhop explained. Evie smiled and followed him, and reached for her white handkerchief, tucked carefully in her dark blue velvet sleeve, and dabbed the stream away from her eyes as her soft dark curls blew back over her shoulder when a gust of the salty, wild Atlantic wind began its pull. As the hours went on and the giant ship cut through the North Atlantic like a silver bullet, slicing through a thrashing blue monster, Evie entered her cabin suite on the first deck. It was a four-room suite with a white walls with crown moldings over the doorways of mermaids and ships of the sea. Alone in her cabin, Evie began to daydream about what America would look like and what she would do to pass the time in her new life. She hoped that she could travel across the country and that her soon-to-be husband would share her passion for reading about history and art. After all, they were children when they last saw each other. She had no idea what he would really be like now that they were older. She gazed down at a staircase she brought, suitcase, she brought with her, filled with just books. She opened one of her favorites about the art of Austrian painter von Alt. She thought about the okay, yeah, that's right. She thought about the photographs that were sent of Sebastian. He was handsome, much more handsome than she remembered him when they were both 11. But was he interesting? Was he creative? Was he kind? She thought about the estate she'd move into. Estate, right? Okay, estate she moved into. That rested on a small island and village off the coast of Maine, and thought about all the art on the walls, her passion, everything art and culture. Then her stomach sank. There was so much more to Sebastian than just him. He had a whole family she would soon become a part of. She thought of him, her new her new family, or sorry, thought of them, her new family, his grandmother, Rebecca, a stoic woman with deep religious and spiritual convictions, oh shit, and his uncle Jacob, equally harsh in the ways of affection, and Jacob's young daughter Charlotte. They were faces she did not know, but would soon be one of them as their new family member. The sway of the ship set to sea eased her nerves slightly, like lulling a baby to sleep in a crib. The further out into the dark blue water Evie sat at the small desk with ship stationery with a large anchor at the top with a large swirl letter I for a name of the ship. The RMS is a Bria. Evie grabbed similarly marked fountain pen and wrote on the white paper a letter to herself, a letter to remind herself who she was and where she came from, and to always know that she needed to look out for herself. She folded up the letter and placed it in the pages of a book of Von Alt, then took a deep breath in and exhaled. Where'd you like these, miss? Apologies for the lateness of your baggage, another ship bell with an Irish accent asked as he crowded her cabin door with her suitcases. Oh, just over here, thank you, she replied. Off to America, then? He asked curiously, wondering where the beautiful brunette would end up. I am. Maine, Aunt, she answered. Maine, eh? Lovely place, I reckon. I had a cousin who fur trapped round there about 5 years ago. He settled in Boston after, though. Anyway, safe travels, miss. Evie smiled politely as the Irish bellhop departed, and a short, stocky woman entered. It was Evie's cabin mate, a rich older woman named Catherine Randall Ruth, who was on her way to back New England herself after a long holiday in her new homeland. Oh, darling, I hope this trip goes fast. I can't stand any more travel, Catherine Ruth. How you do? How do you do? The wealthy woman said, removing a glove to shake Evie's hand. Evie said sweetly, they're bringing my things up later. I have a lot. I always seem to return back home with more than I brought, don't you? Catherine asked. Sorry. Hmm. Oh, I'm not returning. This is my first time to America, he replied. Is it now? My dear, you'll love it. I first came about 13 years ago. We landed in New York City. It's glorious. Dirty in places, I'll admit, but glorious. I've seen a lot of New England since we've moved. A lot. You'll be in New York, I imagine. A young thing like you, Catherine guessed. Oh, no, no, Maine, actually. Catherine crinkled her tiny, photo like nose. Her brow furrowed, and she adjusted her mink coat as if Evie had said something offensive. Maine? Darling, why? Catherine replied with a snobbish distaste for the more rural American states. It's where my husband, well, future husband, lives. I'm getting married there in a few days, Evie explained. Married? Oh, my love. You're a bride to be? Traveling alone? Well, then you must be glad I'm here to comfort you. Tell me, where in Maine is this husband to be? I can't imagine anything more fabulous than New York City. To be descriptive, Catherine said with a sense of passive aggression that Evie was used to from highbrow women like her. Evie sighed, her annoyance that she had to now go and on about this husband of hers, a whole tale of money and power, and the idea that she had received the fruits of her own lucrative betrothal left a strange taste in her mouth. But she did it. She played along. She entertained Catherine. My in-laws live in a small village on an island called, Catherine interrupted. Evie, as her mind paused to remember the town's name, Catherine's eyes broke out of a head when she realized just where Evie was going. Welshport. You're not going to Welshport Island, are you? Oh, yes, that's it. Yes, my fiance's family are the Lords. Do you know them? Evie replied. The Lords? Why, yes, of course. Everyone knows that family. They're one of the wealthiest in this area. Why, their publishing empire rules the printing presses for some of the biggest papers in the country. But, darling, how did you get intertwined in them? What do you mean? Evie asked, unsure of what her cabin, cabin mean. Have you not heard of David Lord and what he did? Catherine replied, mentioning her future father-in-law by name. So, do you know the Lords? Evie wondered. Yes, well, no, not personally, but darling, the whole of Upper New England knows what that man did 6 years ago, don't you? The rich older woman asked, clutching the tightly wrapped cameo on her neck. Evie did not know. She had met David Lord and his son Sebastian when they were both 11 years old. She had every memories of David other than his blue eyes and beautiful trimmed beard. Her memories of Sebastian were too foggy. She received over years photographs of him that painted him in a gauzy black and white shine, but nothing of family gossip and ever reached her ears in England. Clearly, Catherine knew more than she had maybe her own family did. What happened? Evie asked. I don't know if I should, darling. I'd hate to continue gossip this way, especially with someone who will soon join that family. And truth be told, every family has their ghastly secrets, but, well, I should just come out with it, Catherine said, scooting her small chair closer to Evie so that she was about to say could only be heard to those in the cabin. It's better you know before you get there. Oh, Evie said in a strange tone, worried about what was to come. You see, Catherine said as she was interrupted by the Irish bellhop. Your means, ma'am, he said to Catherine. Oh, wonderful, darling. Stack the trunks over here. Yes, there is good. And the bags next to Miss Jordan's, please. Thank you, love. She's going to Maine, the bellhop replied to Evie's nervous smirk. So I've heard. Welshport, in fact, Catherine replied to the ghost-faced bellhop. Welshport. Ma'am, indeed, Catherine said as she sat back down on her chair next to Evie. The bellhop took a deep breath and swallowed hard and dashed out of the cabin, alarming Evie's senses. What was it about? Welshport and the family? She was about to become a part that no one told her. Her heart was pounding. She could feel the sweat on of nerve strip down her back and settle in the grooves her tightly wound corset. Her breathing was shallow as she prepared to hear the truth of this family. Catherine looked around as if the walls, as if there were others listening, and then again scooted herself closer. Darling, David Lord went missing after a very scandalous incident. He had a horrible affliction of drinking too much, and it seems there was some sort of affair in the household. The rumor is that David's brother Jacob had been very close to Sabrina, David's wife. Well, things didn't end very well for Sabrina. You see, David, so it is said, drowned her in as jealous rage right there in one of those murky beaches off the island. Jacob was said to have been devastated, of course, Sebastian too, his mother and his uncle together. Who could imagine that? Well, things went from horrid to even worse when David vanished into thin air. No one has seen him since. There's even a rumor that Jacob's younger daughter is Sabrina's daughter. Not a soul on that island knows who's that little girl's mother truly is. Jacob's never been married, Catherine explained. That's horrible. I don't know what to say, Evie said as she hid her shaking hands under a soft fold of her long skirt. Oh dear, I've done it again. I've said too much, sweet girl. Always remember, rumors are just terrible. Not a word of this could be true. Fiction, you see, is the sweet nectar that upper crust of New England society lives off of. I should have kept my big American mouth shut. Evie sat in her chair, staring deep into Catherine's bewildering brown eyes, and said nothing as the older woman went on and on. What could she say? What combination of words in the English language could she even utter to make what Catherine had just revealed to her sound better? Well, say something, Catherine shouted. Evie paused. Nothing was coming out of her mouth. All she could feel was crumping and tightening in her stomach. Suddenly she turned and vomited all over the floor of her luxury ocean liner suit. Seasickness. It happens to the best of us, love. Lie down, Catherine said, attributing Evie's sudden nausea to the typical seasickness and not from the scandal she just revealed. As Evie processed the news of the strange murder and disappearance in her new family, while she lay back in her small, soft bed, the ship began to rock harder as it settled into a storm. Just off the coast of the ocean, Catherine entered Evie's room to replace the cold rag on Evie's forehead and quickly grabbed her seat next to the ailing Evie's bedside. The two women grabbed each other and whimpered in fear as the feeling of the sea beating the side ship rushed into their chest. Evie felt every heart drop. It wasn't the sea, it wasn't the storm. It was the idea of what in the world had her mother gotten her into by marrying into this family. Had they all known and allowed her to leave England to America all alone anyway? Had they fed her to the wolves for the money and prestige of becoming in-laws to such a powerful New England family like the Lords? Evie lay in her private quarters inside the cabin listening the waves outside her tiny circular cabin window. She closed her eyes and foghorn scooped her. The rocking of the ship lulled her away to a place in her mind that she had not ever tapped into. In her mind, deep in sleep, she stood alone in a dark place, dressed in a white nightgown. She could feel a strange fog floating around her. Then suddenly a white door with a large golden doorknob, adorned with a lion above the large golden purple flowers below. The door appeared to her in the middle of the darkness. She squinted her eyes and walked slowly through this fog in her mind and gripped the doorknob. Once she reached it, she turned it, but it did not open. She then stepped away the door that was standing freely in the middle of the blank place in her mind and the other day. On the other side of the door again. She then grabbed the knob and turned it open the door. When she opened the door, a violent wind rushed and pulled her into a vast sucking vortex. She began falling into another black void that seemed to go on, and there was no bottom. She screamed into the wind that sucked her into the white door, but it was no use. There was no one around to save her, to pull her out, to take her away from whatever the deep, dark place was, wherever the deep, dark place was taking her. She opened her mouth and screamed again, and suddenly she was back in her cabin on the RMS Iberia, shaken away by her old roommate. Awake by her old roommate. Wake up, child. You've been screaming for 10 minutes. What is it? What were you dreaming of? Catherine asked, also dressed in a white nightgown with blue fringe that ticked the tops off her feet. Sweating and breathing heavily, Evie said nothing. She only shook her head and turned over in her bed, with a white sheet with the same ship insignia on the pillowcases on the deck, stationary. Catherine grimaced, knowing full well that her story was of a strange occurrences in Welshport, perhaps what was causing Evie's unease. You'll be all right, Catherine whispered, and she tiptoed back to her quarters across the cabin suite. A flicker of light sparkled the wick of a candle, and hand covered one side of the burning flame to keep burning as the cold wind off the ocean flooded off of chilly Frenchman Bay. The candle, surrounded by darkness, seemed to float over to a table covered in black cloth with golden embroidery. As the candle burned hotter, the light revealed a seat of several tarot cards, carefully faced down in a row of 5. A man's hand, crowned with a large golden and emerald ring on the left pinky finger, flipped the first card over, the smiling sun. A misguided truth, he explained, as the card's meaning. Then the second card, the Knight of Cups, a symbol of Stoic family, the man explained. Then the seventh and fourth in quick succession, the Seven Daggers, the Red River. 7 days of piercing pain, followed by an awakening, working brethren, the man said. Finally, the final card that would see this new fortune close for good, as the fifth card was about by the flipping by the man with the golden emerald ring. Another hand from across the table stopped him. Wait, an older woman's voice said. What is it? The man replied, his English dripped with a deep French accent. The Red River, she asked, moving closer to the light. Roland, a woman about 65, her hair up in tight red curls that were going white with age, her eyes as clear blue as the main sky in spring. Gasper, I've never seen that one, she added, revealing the French soothsayer by name, as she reached for her neck that was covered in 5 layers of pearls. Madam, as I mentioned, Bertha in the Red River is a symbol of bloodline, particularly male. A female connection, a familial connection, a lineage of the Lord family, your family, Caspar replied. The older woman, Rebecca Lord, lifted one of her faint eyebrows and squeezed solid gold rosary that was clenched tightly in her hand, reluctantly accepting his explanation. She mentioned with her hand, she motioned with her hand for him to flip the final card. He took a deep breath and did so. The drowned prince, an older woman, gasped. No, God. Do not explain, Rebecca said in a hushed voice. You must promise this card won't come true. If it means what my mind is trying to deny, it cannot let it happen. Madam, I can only show you what is in the cards. I cannot control what will or will not happen in life, the mystic replied in a French accent. Rebecca was no soothsayer herself, but had studied the art of tarot for years and years, and had often taken lessons from the young Frenchman sitting in front of her. He was her guide, the man she allowed to live in her household on Welshport Island, that made her feel safe, that showed her the way. The drowned man terror signified a great darkening in their future, especially for the purple prince of the Lord family, the woman's grandson, Sebastian. Gasper grabbed the older woman's hand and squeezed. It'll be more clear when she arrives, madam. Rebecca, I promise you, Sebastian will be safe. We'll keep him safe despite what these cards read of Miss Evie Gasper, said, mentioning Rebecca's beloved grandson Sebastian, Evie's betrothed. This spells disaster, Gaspar. Disaster. I need sage. I need to sage this place. This whole estate has had the curse marked on it since the older woman named Rebecca Lord paused, going over the horrible memories of the tragedy that shook the Lord family to its core since it all happened. Nothing has ever been the same, and we need to cleanse this place, she finished. Yes, madam, but we can do something else to ensure that Miss Evie's arrival it isn't a disaster with all things in this spiritual realm. We know that they are not to be all and end all. Our faiths are not Infinite indeed. They are flexible and fluid, like the sea, gasped Parkinson, and a handsome Frenchman who acted as Rebecca's in-house spiritual advisor. What recognize. Rebecca pulled a black shawl that was draped round her shoulders as the chill from the outside air filled the room, and blew on the candle flame in front of them. She covered her white hair with it and stood up from Gaspar's table. Do something, the Lord Family Matriarch replied coldly. My dear Gaspar, nothing in this realm, the next, will stop me from keeping my grandson safe. Nothing, she added cryptically as she stormed out of the room, disappointed, furious at her car reading. As Rebecca left her reading, she reached for the room's golden doorknob, crafted with golden lion's head and golden poppy flowers attached to the white door. She just like the one in Evie's dream, aboard the umbrella. Rebecca slammed the door shut. A gust of wind blew out the candle in front of Gaspar. Then a match lit the candle again. The light reflected the face of the man who was secretly watching in the corner of the room, hidden in the shadows. It was Jacob Lord, Rebecca's optimistic and craving son, who'd always see an unerring benefit to his mother's more extravagant, superstitious beliefs. Well, what do you think she'll do? Gaspar asked, somewhat mocking Rebecca, knowing she was overreacting. Don't you worry about my mother. She'll fall into her place in our plan just fine. It'll be perfect, Jacob said as he quickly licked his thumb and forefinger and exhausted the candle. He extinguished the candle in a puff of smoke. Back aboard the ship, Evie woke in a gasp of air as the fog horns beckoned an arrival. Damn it. To the shore. As the sun rose in a purple and orange sky. Her room was cold. She could see her own smoke like breath in early morning air. Evie got out of bed when she noticed the tiny hall window of her cabin was open and her night clothes. She shivered and tiptoed her way on the hardwood floors to the window and grabbed the brass handle to close it, but as she did, she noticed the umbrella had arrived in Frenchman's Bay and the glistening marina of Welshport. This was her brand new world and an uncertain future, scary future. Okay, guys, so that's chapter one, to Benight and Beguile. So Evie is in an arranged marriage. Now, for those who don't know what that is, back in the heyday, long, long, long time ago, many women's marriages or people's marriages were arranged, in fact, and usually it was generally over money, like the story is suggesting. And obviously, Evie isn't happy that she's being married off. Now she has met Sebastian when she was 11. But again, this is not something she wanted in her life, but it's something she has to accept now. Because basically, there was no way, back then, there was no way out of arranged marriages. Well, technically there was if you murdered the person, but other than that, there wasn't really any way out of them. I've talked about this before. Women back in the heyday had no, like, they were treated like second class citizens, actually less than that. Um, and really, they just were. I mean, it just is crazy. But so I'm really enjoying how he's sort of using that in this story. How she's promised to this um, young man, Sebastian, at a very young age, um, when they get old enough, they're going to marry. Okay, well, now she's old enough, and now she has to marry him. And their family's on hard times, and his family isn't. His family still has money. Now, her family wasn't on hard times, at the time of the arrangement, but again, still, it's like, you know, and now here she's learned something, that something happened with this family. But according to the woman who told it to her, it's it's just a rumor. Rumors turn. Here's the thing about rumors. Some rumors turn out to be true. Some rumor, not always. And I'm not saying that's the case in this story. I'm not going to give anything away. But I'll say this, because I'm going to read chapter. I'm going to have chapter 2 read by next week. Um, I like how he described the ocean and going across it, and I love how the fact you have a woman, an elderly woman, a grandmother, who reads tarot cards. Now we knew she was religious, but tarot cards is interesting because she deals with someone who knows how to do that, who knows how to read them, and she knows how to read them too. But and here's Jacob, who, who's a who's who's got some plans of his own, and we'll have to find out what those plans are now, won't we? Link is going to be in the description box. I like it so far. I think it's really interesting. The one thing I was curious about with Evie was, does she like? She likes art and stuff and history. Okay, well, history. The thing with history in 1911, a lot of history was written down at that time about like magic and shit. So I'm curious if she knows anything about that. That's the one thing I'm most curious about with Evie, because again, if you're with most historians, most people who love history, I'm not saying she's a historian, but she's a history nut. Most history nuts have all sorts of facets with history in general, is what I'm trying to say, because I'm a history nut. So that's why I say that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this review. Link will be in the description box. Guys, go check out this new story, Chapter 1, A New World, Benight and Beguile, written by John Philip Bencourt.